to the cloud. So we're now recording, everyone. So not that we were saying anything rude before, but I think we have lost Damien. Yep, no one can see him, can they? So would you normally go straight into your guest speakers? Because obviously we don't know the format. So could someone tell us the format?
Hi, Eve, it's Leanne here. Yeah, we normally just, everybody introduces and says where they're ringing in from, and then we jump straight in. So,
okay. Thanks, Leanne. Okay, so if that's the case, then Peter and I probably ought to introduce ourselves and then just start. And we thought we had till 5:30. Let me put that in Pacific time, 9:30. Otherwise I'll worry you all. Is that your thoughts as well? Because again, we just need to check you're expecting the same thing.
Yes, Damien and sent us an email saying that this would be 90 minutes. So yes, it's in the blurb that we got sent.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, we haven't seen the blurb, so that's just very good to know. So welcome everyone who's been joining in while we've been chattering away, because I can see lots of people who've been joining. I can see Janet and Natalia. Oh, and Damien's joined us again, Fern, Indra, Sophie. So thank you everyone for joining. Does anyone want to just say hello before we start, who's joined recently?
Hi there, this is
Mary Jo, and I'm from Michigan, United States.
Great. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. This is Jean-Christophe, and I'm dialing in from Paris. Hello, Peter.
Bonsoir, monsieur.
Hello, I'm Adriana Rodriguez from Mexico City.
Buenos dias.
Thank you.
Adriana.
Hello, my name is Samia, and I'm calling from Paris. Nice to meet you all, one of you.
Bonsoir.
Hi there,
Marie Quigley here, calling in from Qatar, Doha, Qatar.
Brilliant, thank you.
Salam alaikum.
Hello, Maureen Robotham calling in from the suburbs of Paris. Bonjour.
Brilliant.
Bienvenue.
Hi, I'm Eric calling from Paris too.
A good French contingent.
And can I just say, there's somebody whose name is user, and it'd be lovely if they put their real name on the screen.
It's Eric, but I cannot manage to change the username.
I can do that. So I call you Eric, E-R-I-C?
Yes, right.
Okay, voila.
Merci.
Think nothing of it. Thank you.
Brian Duggan from Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada.
Oh, hi, Brian.
Hi.
Anyone else would like to say
yes.
hello?
Roger Facial from the suburb of Paris.
Oh, fantastic.
Susie Warman from Mexico too.
Hello, Susie.
Hi there, this is Natalia Pestalozzi from Arlington, Virginia.
Hi.
Welcome.
Hi, Natalia. This is Janet Shepherd from Vancouver Island, BC.
Phoebe Hansen from Washington, D.C.
Alessandro from Milano, Italy, all the way from Milano, Italy.
I hope you're not. I hope you're not having to protect yourself from the virus, Alessandro.
No, we have been through other serious troubles. This is something. You know, the funny thing it is, everything started yesterday because they found somebody positive, but it was a mistake of the laboratory. So the guy wasn't, so we have blocked a total city, not a big one, okay, 1.5 million people, because somebody missed the exam in the laboratory.
Oh dear. They may not be very popular.
But now it's done, and you know it's difficult to come back. Schools are closed. You don't find anything to eat because everybody has bought everything, like like during the war. I mean,
well, I'd send you a food parcel, but it might not get delivered.
Anyway, sorry, I come back to my mute.
Thank you, Alessandro. Well, I think, Peter, that we should start. So,
from Paris.
Sorry.
Hi, Eve. This is Martin from Paris.
Oh, hello, Martin.
Martin.
Welcome. Is there anyone else who would like to say hello?
Well, I want
from New York.
Los Angeles, and I want to apologize because there is a cut of electricity in my neighborhood, so I will not be able to co-facilitate, but I really appreciate Eve and Peter being here with us today. For the people who are joining us for first time, with Lily Zero, we co-facilitate these meetings once a month, and every month we have different guests, so we hope that the people who are here for first time keep joining us. If you are not in our mailing list, please contact us so we can invite you in the future. And I want to thank Peter and Eve for accepting being part of our program today. Both of you are leaders, pioneers in the field. So thank you for joining us and for supporting our network since the beginning.
Well, thank you, Damien. And we're looking forward, I'm looking forward to seeing many of you at the All Americas Conference in Mexico in May. Where I'll also be speaking. So hopefully a number of you will be able to come to that.
Yeah, for people who are joining also for first time, we have a conference once a year, and Peter joined us in our first conference, and Eve was there too. We had our second conference last year, and this year we have May 7 and 8 in Mexico City, where Peter is coming back to be our keynote. So thank you, Peter, for joining us there too.
Excellent. So,
Peter, do you want to introduce yourself first?
do I need to introduce myself? Only to say that it's like. Oh, I'm now getting an echo. If we could put the other mics on mute, because otherwise I hear myself coming back, which is always disconcerting. It's always a delight to be joining my colleagues from many parts of the world. It's delightful. We've got people from many parts of Europe as well as many parts of the Americas today. And Lily asked us to do this because she joined a session that Eve and I took for the Global Supervisors Network, which Eve coordinates, back in December, when we were trying to introduce the whole area of how do we bring the wider stakeholder world into our supervision. And including the wider ecology. And we based that on this model that I developed for a whole webinar series that Zoe Cohen coordinated for the ICF, looking at climate conscious and eco-aware coaching and supervision. And we talked about how do we help our coaching clients and our supervisees go through these 4 stages of progression. And some people have pointed out this shouldn't be just an upward arrow, because it's more like a cycle. But how do we do our own work about going from being eco-informed and aware of what's happening in the ecology and the climate crisis, and then to being eco-aware, which is about how do we do our psychological work of dealing with all our emotions that get stirred up when we face the ecological and climate crisis, to how do we bring that appropriately into our coaching work and our supervision work, and then at the 4th stage, how do we go beyond just changing what we do individually, but also taking responsibility for shifting our whole profession? How do we influence others? So that's the journey we want to take you on today. So we.
Did you want me to say something as well? So, I thought you were going to say something about yourself, Peter. So yes, we ran this session a few months ago. Peter and I are both supervisors. We've just written a book, which a lot of this presentation is part of. So I will just briefly show the book. So it's about systemic coaching, and the subtitle is very difficult to read actually. Delivering value beyond the individual. And the idea was, how do we go beyond delivering value and asking the question, what can I do for you today, dear client, to what does the world need us to do today, all our stakeholders? And then the concept of stakeholders was very much the more than human world. So that's really how this has come about. And I think we'll just carry on now, shall we, Peter?
And just as part of that, we'll also share our own journey about going through this journey. And as some of you know, part of that began for me when years back, when I started to realize, and there was this lovely moment in South Africa that I often quote, where a young black manager, when listening to a presentation by the regional government in Cape Town about what they were doing to create a coaching culture, said, "This sounds like to me that the people with the big cars, the big offices and the big paychecks now get the big coaches. It sounds like coaching is very expensive personal development for the already highly privileged." And that got me really thinking about, how do we ensure that the coaching is not just delivering personal development for the already highly privileged, but how do we move on to seeing that coaching is never just about personal development? You're never just coaching an individual, because when the individual turns up, their team dynamic, their organizational culture, the human consciousness of our species, the ecological issues, all turn up inside them and around them. And then that applies even more to supervision. We are never just supervising a coach, because their current clients, their future clients, their clients' organizations, the ecology are all turning up within that supervisee. So this notion about how do we supervise through the individual, not just supervise the individual. And if we go on to the next slide, Eve. So what we want to do is to explore some of the elements of systemic supervision with you. And how do we do that in a way that delivers value for our supervisees, their coaches teams, organizations, and the wider ecology? And what are the appropriate ways of bringing the ecology into the supervision? And if we go on to the next slide. To do that, we want to kind of model that with you. And what we'd like to do is to invite you to put down your paper, your notes, your pens, put both feet flat on the ground, and sit back in your chair. And when you've done that, with your seat as far back in the chair as possible, and your spine as upright as possible, I invite you to close your eyes. And just to center yourself. With your eyes closed, to take a big in breath. And imagine that breath is coming right up from the earth, through the floor, through your feet, your legs, your tummy, your chest, your face, and up through the spine, stretching your spine upwards to the heavens. And then take a big breath out through your mouth. And as you do that, we'd like to invite you to imagine that you're on a time machine. You're being transported to 2035, 15 years from now. And to look around you and see what is happening as you step out of your time machine somewhere near to where you currently live. And you wander to a nearby park. It may be changed. There may be different buildings around it. And see what's happening to the air, the temperature, climate. And as you sit there on the bench, I invite you to imagine that a young person, a young teenager is coming in, sitting next to you on the bench. And you start to chat to them. You, who is now 15 years older than you are today. And they asked you about what it was like 15 years ago when the climate crisis was just beginning to take hold. And how you've seen the world change in the last 15 years. And they challenge you about, what did you do that made a difference when the great turning was happening and things were starting to change? What did you do in your work that really helped and made a difference? And were you doing enough? And you ask them, what else could I have been doing? And then you ask them, and you tell them that you're traveling back to a webinar back in 2020. And you ask them, what's the question that you think I should be asking in 2020 about my work and about what more I could be doing? Allow yourself to listen to their answer. And then, as you walk back to your time machine, you start to reflect on who and what your supervision serves. What's your supervision work in service of? And who is it in service of? And as you travel back in your time machine back to 2020, February, I invite you to open your eyes and just to put into the chat box what questions you're bringing back from 2035 about supervision in your work now. And we'll just take a little short pause just to allow you to put in what questions you brought back with you that the future needs us to be asking today. So when you're ready, just put those into the chat box, open your eyes, and we'll just read out a few that are coming in. So from Jonathan Sibley, why aren't you doing more? From Meryl Maritz, what will we not sacrifice for success, advancement? From Dana, what is your relationship with the environment right now to leave something for the future? What is it costing us all? Did I act, Brian asked, to make change? From Lise, what did you think was going to happen by not doing anything or enough? From Maureen, how can we collectively manage our emotions and have a productive impact? Lovely question, we'll come back to that. How are we transforming our industry to support our clients create a sustainable humanity? What is my role as supervisor to help my clients be more aware of their role? With whom you can do more? Who are the people you can do more with? What were you waiting for? How could you have made it a priority? Lovely questions, keep those coming in. If we go back to the slides, Eve, we could, if we could go back to sharing, yeah, lovely. We could start to think, well, if we're not just supervising a coach, and indeed today I was asked the question, what's the difference between coach mentoring and supervision? In supervision, we have so many more people we are in service of. This is just a list of some of those that we found ourselves kind of coming up with, but you might think of others. That actually our supervision should be serving the supervisee in their development, their current clients, but also their future clients, their not yet clients, the organizations that those people work for, the stakeholders of those organizations, the organizations the supervisee works for, but also supervision should be a place which is in service of the profession, continuing to learn and be at the professional learning edge. So one of the things even I think about when we think about quality supervision is how long in the session have we and our supervisees and our profession all be standing together at our collective learning edge? Are we just exchanging pre-cooked thoughts, or are we together standing side by side, both not knowing what needs to happen, but knowing the world out there is asking us to respond? And thus, supervision should be serving future generations, the environment, the future clients. And I love this one from David, which has come in. What assumptions do I make that can no longer be valid? So you might want to add to that. We might come back to that in the discussion, but who else are we serving in supervision? But if you go on to the next slide, what we were looking at in the book is about the nature of systemic supervision and then systemic coaching. This means that it needs to be informed by a systemic perspective. It needs to be in service of all parts, all stakeholders, learning and developing, not just the people in the room with us. It attends to the client in relation to their systemic context and always sees things in connections, not in the parts. And it always needs to include a reflection on ourselves as part of the system we're attending to. We cannot see a system that we're not part of. And therefore, and Eve's holding up her doll, therefore we have to realize, you see, often what happens is we think in terms of nested systems, and is Eve's doll's here as well as next to Eve in her room. And often we think of ourselves as a coach in the coaching relationship with the individual inside their team, with the team inside the organization inside its business ecosystem, and that inside an ecological ecosystem. But we forget to realize that the reverse nesting happens, that the ecology, the culture, the organization, the team dynamic turn up inside the individual. So if we go on to the next slide. So that means to work ecosystemically, we need to be working in partnership, not seeing supervision as something done by the supervisor or coaching is done by the coach, but rather we are shoulder to shoulder, both facing what are the challenges and questions that life is bringing to our supervisee or our client. What are the difficult client situations that are providing the learning agenda for us both in partnership to work on? We have to learn how to supervise not just the individual work, but how do we help our coachee, our supervisee coach connections? We have to help them develop how they bring multi-stakeholder contracting into their work. Eve and I, we can give you the reference, did some research on multi-stakeholder contracting around the world, and a lot of it was very disappointing insofar as a lot of people were saying, yes, this is really important, we should do it, but a lot of what was happening was just bringing in either an HR representative or the boss to comment on the individual, rather than do a collaborative inquiry on what can we do together, right? Coachee, coach, representative of the organization. What is it that the world's asking the organization to change? What does that mean? The team needs to shift, and the leadership needs to shift, and the culture needs to shift. Therefore, what does this individual need to change in order to influence all of that? So what's the work we all need to do together? And how can we all work together to enable that? ways of not only having multi-stakeholder contracting, but also getting the stakeholder's voice into the room. And this applies to supervision. How do we get the client, not just the person talking about their clients, but the client's voice, the organization's voice into the supervision room? How do we surface the ecological issues? And how do we make sure that there is a flow back from the supervision into change at all levels of the systemic nested systems? So Eve.
Yeah, so thinking back to the model that Peter showed right at the start, where we start is being eco-informed, and we've called it waking up to the 21st century challenges. Just over a year ago now, Peter and I were both sort of really curious and thoughtful about where were all the coaches when the planet warmed by 3 degrees. That was a hark back to something Peter had written, I think in 2009 or 2008, when he'd said, what were all the coaches doing when the banks were burning? So where were all the coaches when the planet warmed by 3 degrees? And it was asked on LinkedIn by one of our colleagues, Zoe Cohen. And what you can see on the right is just some slightly out of date information on warming that's projected by the year 2100. And actually, things have got worse, not better, which is unfortunate. So what does it mean with a 3-degree temperature rise? Well, I won't repeat everything that's said, but there are some cities, I know there are people from Miami on this call. Look at the cities that would be underwater. There'll be many in Northern Europe, there'll be many. We've already seen just last month and at the end of 2019, the awful fires in Australia, the bushfires that have just claimed, they believe, something like 1 billion animals' lives and have devastated food stocks. And then it was followed by floods. So I was talking to some people 2 weeks ago because through something I've set up called the Climate Coaching Alliance, we were running a workshop on trauma. And somebody in my group, we were working in a breakout group, her village had been saved from the fires and 90 homes had been destroyed and the fires had gone round her house. But then the day before the trauma workshop, her house had been flooded. And that was in Australia. And we've seen it in places like Bangladesh. So those are just some of the examples of what 3-degree temperature rise will look like. We're not there yet, but we're certainly heading for there. And there's not a lot of sign of it changing. This is something you may not have come across, but I just encourage you to look at Earth Overshoot Day. It's really interesting. What this is basically saying is that our planet can renew itself in a year. What it can renew in a year, it does so. But at the rate at which we are currently using resources, we are using the Earth's resources in less than a year, so it can't renew itself. So what you have in 2 decades, from 1999 to 2019, the date has shifted. So it was the 29th of July in 1999, and that's the wrong way around, sorry. And in the 29th of September, it's in 2019. So we're now using nearly double the Earth's resources. So you can see that that can't be sustainable. Now, this is a really difficult chart to see. So I have written down some examples for you. This is the last chart just showed you the overall picture, but actually different countries are different users of resources. So on the right-hand side, the very first country, February the 11th, Qatar. A couple of people were based in Qatar. Well, they are February the 11th. By February the 11th, they've used all the resources per head of population that the Earth could renew in a year. And then you come down to March the 15th, USA, March the 18th, Canada. And then you go all the way around this, and you can go to Bolivia and Iran, which is July the 6th, Paraguay, July the 12th. You can go to Venezuela, which is in August the 23rd. You can go to Colombia, which is in October, Uruguay in November, and then all the way around to Ecuador, which is really just using a year's resources in a year. Isn't that a disturbing sort of chart about our consumption? So I find that very interesting, if not very worrying. And you can find that on the Earth Overshoot Day website. So, Peter, I think it's back to you.
Unmute. And it's interesting, when we presented this stuff in many conferences for coaches, they said, but, and I had a very angry letter from somebody in Brazil who said, you know, what was I doing when the world was warming by 3 degrees? The exact same thing as I was doing when there was any announcement on the news, getting on with my work. And at one conference, several people said, oh, we've gone back a slide. Several people said, but you know, it's not our job to bring the ecology into the coaching room. And I thought, well, that's a very interesting belief system. And I found myself, because I'm known for being provocative, to say to them, does that mean your clients don't breathe? They don't eat? If they breathe and eat, the ecology is already in the coaching and supervision room. The ecology is not something out there. It's something that we are inextricably part of and can't exist without. There was somebody who said, we have to recognize that every organization in the world is a wholly owned subsidiary of the environment, and the environment can shut down any subsidiary. I thought that's a big comment. So why do we say, well, look, actually, he was arguing with me, that this person from Brazil, that why is the environment any more important than somebody trying to attack their president in the street? And this was some of the answers we came up with. It affects everything on our planet and risks the future of everything, not just human beings, but every species. It's not a political issue, it's an issue of survival. It's going to affect every business, every community, every government. It's an issue that can be addressed, we would argue, with a shift in human consciousness. To the extent that we're now saying that we've got to recognize that all coaching, all psychotherapy, all HR, all leadership development is part of one larger movement. And that is, how do we shift human consciousness for the human species to be future fit to live on this planet? How do we help future fit individuals, future fit teams, future fit organizations? Because without a massive shift in human consciousness from individualistic intelligence to collaborative intelligence, it was Gregory Bateson who said, I think almost 40, 50 years ago, he said, without that, we do not have a snowball in hell's chance of surviving the next 100 years. The other thing is that the ecological issues are inextricably caught up with so many other of the issues in the world. You can't really deal with any political issue, whether it's war, global inequality, diversity, without the ecological issues playing a part in that. As I said, it's already in the room, but most of us are suffering from willful blindness. A lovely phrase from my colleague Margaret Heffernan. And so part of our job is how do we open up to see what is already there and is already present? Because so much of our thinking is the ecological climate crisis is something that belongs to future generations, and the environment is something out there. How do we reverse that thinking? So we go on to the next slide. What we'd like to do is to invite you to go to a breakout session, which Eve's going to organize. And just for you in the threes that Eve will locate you into, address these two questions. How might we be colluding in our current work? Who are we keeping outside the supervision room, and what are we keeping out? And how might we appropriately, not by campaigning or bringing in our own agenda, but how might we surface some of the things that we're currently colluding to leave outside the room? So we're going to give you 10 minutes just in threes to share that with whoever you end up in the room with. And don't worry, you'll get a thing inviting you to come back. You'll come back automatically, but all you'll have to do is click on the breakout room that you get offered when Eve manages to put it up there. You need to unmute.
Should say, as co-host, I don't have access to the breakout rooms, unfortunately. I'm only been made co-host, so only Damien can do the breakout rooms. That's one of the vagaries of Zoom. It's only the main host who has the logo, the symbol. So
well, Damien
Damien
can change you into full
Yes,
host.
I can do that. How many people do you want in the room, Peter?
We want to have 3 in a room. So if you make it 16 rooms,
Okay.
because Peter and I make sure that Peter and I aren't in a room, or if we are, we're in a room of 4 because Peter and I won't join.
For some reason, it's not allowing me to do rooms. I don't know why, if at this point, I'm sorry about that, but I just got into Lily's system and for some reason, it's not giving me that choice.
Well, in which case, let's take that
So
as a...
recently that happened to me, and it's because we were co-host. So it needs to be one full host somewhere.
Okay.
And co-host can do that.
Okay,
But it may be that Damien has logged in as a participant and not as the host, because you have to go, it would have to be changed over to Damien as host, I think.
So can you do, let me see if I can change that.
There are 2 Damien Goldbergs on the thing. One is Lily's picture.
Maybe that's the reason why. Okay.
Well, if not, we'll have a lovely discussion.
No, I can do it now. I can do it now.
Great. We hope it's just about to happen.
Okay, so people are invited to go to rooms of 4 people.
Great.
Yes, sorry, thank you. Well spotted, Damien. I put a big notice and then forgot about unpausing, sorry.
And just let me bring something back from our little foursome, which was, we started to discuss how if you don't mention the stakeholders and wider ecology in the very first meeting of the contracting, it becomes harder to do it later. And we were starting to explore the ways of doing that in a way that's very natural, like, who will we need to bring, who and what do we need to bring into this room to do the supervision work together? Which stakeholders, what might we collude to avoid? How are we going to attend to the climate crisis and the ecology as part of our work together? By starting in that collaborative inquiry, it does make it far easier later on to, in reviews, to say, so how are we, what might we be colluding to avoid in our work together? If we haven't mentioned at the beginning, it becomes more difficult. Let's just hear a couple more encouragements that are coming back to others. Anybody else want to open their mic and just share something, a gift from your foursome?
Let me just add, first of all, Peter, thank you for touching on the who and the what. And I think our conversation was about maybe not bringing in the what, the other systems into it. It's very easy to identify stakeholders as people and conflicts and what have you. But what about the organization? So we're saying we really appreciated your question about, you know, how can we work together for the best of XYZ organization? And I'd like to invite Brian to share what he was saying at the end that was really, I think, brought it to the head. Brian, are you there?
I am here and I can't remember what I said.
I wrote it half down anyway. It was a great positive spin to not taking the colluding and saying, how can we make it into more of a positive framework? But we'll have to.
Yeah, I think that, yeah. So the question was, why would we be coaching today if there's no planet in 2035? Well, I thought, what can we do with coaching today to make sure there's a planet in 2035?
Yeah,
that's what thank you for the reminder.
And I think that's why I keep coming back to these two very simple phrases. How do we supervise and coach outside in and future back. Because I think our whole culture leads us to be both individual centric and human centric, and to deal with what's immediate in front of us. So we're trained to have empathy for those that are close, not those who are far away. We're trained to have empathy for that which is, I like your comment just now, you know, that's individual and human and present. So a lot of our book talks about ways of working future back and outside in, so that we are expanding the range of what we're working with.
I'd like to invite Michael. Oh, sorry, I was going to say Michael has been making some great comments in the chat box, and I thought he might like to say something.
Yeah.
Michael.
Yes, I would like to ask your permission to challenge you as Dr. Heal Thyself.
Yeah.
It's I mean, Peter, I see you traveling all over the world, and of course, conferences are held in different cities. A lot of carbon footprint going on here for people traveling, and you're printing out physical books when there's ebooks. That's more ecological. So I'm just wondering if you're prepared to walk the talk like Coldplay does, and not even tour as a band anymore, but do local concerts instead.
I think that's a very good challenge, Michael, which I really, really appreciate, because I think we all have to, when we get on to EcoActive, we all have to be the challenges to each other. I will be, as part of the Climate Coaching Day on March the 5th, be publishing on my website. And so do read it and come back to me and challenge me more.
Okay.
What my commitments are. I'm just working out my commitments. I've already said, as Damien knows, that I will only do a long haul flight now if I can justify that it will have impact for at least 1,000 people, and that I'm doing at least 5 events the other end. Any other, I will not travel for a keynote speech. I do them all virtually. I'm turning most of my trainings into virtual programs, but you know, I'm still a long way off where I ought to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's
we have to own that as well. Do you know what I mean? I have to own my own failures. I'm another, rather than preach from a place of so-called perfection. Eve.
Martine.
Yes, there are 2 things that I have noticed in the way we're speaking, and that is also an elephant in the room. The first one is people are talking about the planet disappearing. No, the planet is fine. It's humanity, it's going to disappear. So if we go on talking about the planet being endangered, it's too big to be believed. So I think, you know, we're not raising awareness. But speaking about the end of humanity, or the end of the civilized humanity, that is more tangible. It's more true. And
yeah, that's true.
Maybe we can raise awareness by being closer to the truth. Yeah. And the second point is Michael's point, which I like very much. Some people tend to not be aware of the technological non-sustainability that is coming up. Right, it's great. A webinar may be less CO2 tons than all the flights of all of us. Yes, and at the same time, the way we stream HD video, and we stream them again and again and again, is very unecological. And what's the price of an SMS in terms of energy, in terms of storage? Do we delete our data? And I'm not pretending I'm doing it. I'm just saying the idea, the Californian idea, I would say, and that's very archetypal and maybe prejudices, but the California idea that technology is going to solve the issues of the planet, to me, is 2 things that aren't true. The idea that technology is going to save us, and the second one is that the planet is endangered. No, the humanity the civilized humanity is endangered.
Yes, those are very good points. And some other people have made points, which is for training that isn't virtual, it is better to train to be the one traveling to local clients and to have participants travel to the trainer. David says we're all imperfect. It's easy to say we can only comment if we are perfect. That cannot be, but we all should be trying as hard as we can. And you know, there are other comments, but I think what's really good is that we're all having to challenge our own thinking and what we do for ourselves. And interesting, as Martina said, I've been reading some of the articles about the footprint that's left by virtual meetings. So all I know is that it's better on the whole than lots of traveling when I do big webinars, because I don't really move out of my office nowadays, but it doesn't mean it's perfect. Good point.
Could we put this slide back up?
Yeah, please? I was just thinking we needed to. Let me just...
And while you're doing that, let me just say, Martine, that I think one of the things we could do, which I think you've usefully done, and Michael's usefully done, is to actually challenge the assumptions that are embedded in our language and the way that our language separates the human from the more than human. But also to recognize we can talk about the death of the human species, but we also at the same time need to recognize that we think about that in the future, whereas the number of species that are being wiped out every week is already way beyond anything that has previously existed. So, you know, we just need to all the time be very alert, because our language embeds so much dualism and human centrism that's another thing we could be doing. But if you move on to the next slide, Eve. So this notion of the great turning that Joanna Macy and Chris Johnson, their book on active hope, brought up. The question that comes from the future, what are we doing, not just for the urgent and current issues of our supervisees and their clients, but for future generations? And if we go on to the next slide, one of the things we've been writing about is the first work we have to do once we've got eco-informed. And I was very struck, yes, we need to be informed about what to, it's not that there is a perfect answer, but at least we can be informed about what is the cost of putting on a conference? What is the cost of Netflix streaming? I was looking at the carbon footprint of streaming films on Netflix, which is enormous. But what isn't okay any longer is to have conferences that aren't commenting on their own cost. And part of that means we have to do our own work, because one of the things that stops any of us addressing this is what it brings up for us emotionally. We've done some work based on some work my wife previously did about the white awareness model, which was also based on what happens when we face trauma. And these are some of the stages that it takes us through when we have to face, first of all, our own denial and looking at, well, you know, what am I not owning up to? What am I not doing? Then the grief, pain, and trauma, because one of the things that stops us looking is to face what we haven't been aware of or what we've been denying and the cost of that. That can take us into blaming others, into enormous anger, where we get into new forms of splitting and we blame Donald Trump or Johnson or the CEOs of ESO, and you know, we can all have our pet people that we put it onto without recognizing we are all living off the privilege of what these people are doing. So then that takes us into guilt and shame. Then only when we start getting through that can we start to take responsibility. And I will be sharing, if you join Climate Coaching, not only what I'm doing in terms of trying to put my own house into order, but what a lot of colleagues are doing. And one of the things I'm going to be looking at is how do we influence not just our clients, but also all our suppliers. So I've been going into conversations with all the people who run the training centers, the supply chain on the food supplies for the training we do. I wrote a thing for coaches recently. We have more influence through our pension schemes than we do through our vote. You know, what responsibility are we taking for whoever is investing our pension for us? And then how do we take that responsibility to act? And then we can't act alone. We can only do this with others and with the support and challenge, like Michael's to me just now, of others. And then that takes us back round the cycle. It's not something we ever complete. But if we go on to the next slide, Eve, do you want to pick up from there?
Yes. So I think, you know, I can remember these questions. In fact, I can remember from my training actually being told to use some of these questions. Sorry, not the training with Peter. I did some other training in supervision. What do you want from supervision? What would you like to bring to your session today? What are the clients you'd like to talk about? And then at the end, one of our colleagues talks about it as, you know, actually seeking reassurance from our coaches and supervisees. What was helpful and what would be more helpful next time? But what we're really hoping for is what we'd call a pat on the back. And we sort of see those as questions that can be developed. And then I think from what Peter was saying that his group were talking about in the breakouts, here are some questions that we might use now. I mean, like Peter, I find that what I talk about in the first session in contracting will determine how easy bringing in the ecology, the organisations, other stakeholders is later in the work. Tell me about you, what you most care about. Who and what does your work and life serve? What would those people, the organisations, the ecology say is the work we need to do together in supervision? Not always what would you like to talk about today, actually what do we need to do today? And how we are going to attend to the more than human ecological world in our work. And then what might you regret not having worked on? And then when we come to evaluation, bringing in the stakeholders again, and you can choose to name them if you want. If your stakeholders were in the room, what would they have appreciated about the work we've done? What would their challenge to us be? So these are just some of the questions we might use.
And can I just add to that, Eve, that this is a fundamental shift in paradigm, because when we ask, what did you value about your supervision today? We are arrogantly stepping into the role of supplier and believing we've done the supervision. Whereas this paradigm shift puts us into partnership. Yes. Supervision is something collaboratively we're doing together. So the supervisee is no longer the client. Yeah. The supervisee is our partner in the supervisory work in service of their world and our world.
So a lot of people are asking in the box, and I'm sure, Damien, you can make this available. We'll be happy to make it available, and we'll just make sure it's tidied up. And then we'll send you a version, Damien, that you can share with everyone, if you'd like to.
Definitely. We download everything to our website. So if people wonder where they can find it, you can go to our website and also see previous sessions from Eve and from Peter. Pretty great. So it's a great resource for everybody.
Yeah. So I just thought I'd say that, so because people were asking that in the chat box. So how do we invite the ecology in? Well, how do you experience your relationship with the wider ecology? One of our colleagues encourages her clients to look out of the window and say, what do you see? And I did that recently with a supervisee, and it was just really interesting how that stimulated a continuing discussion using pictures. I mean, I have objects. So one of the ones I use is it's a pebble, and just how we can bring the ecology into our room. A lot of people now are using walking. I think there are, we have to be careful how we contract around walking and create safety. But that's a fantastic way of using the outdoors, using earth, using roots. I mean, I'm sure you've all done that in the past. Involving animals and other living beings. A lot of our colleagues are, for example, now doing work with horses. And then, of course, understanding the stages of the model that Peter just explained. So different ways that we can surface the ecology. So I think, Peter, yeah, these are yours to talk to before we get into the next breakout, which we need to do very quickly if we're going to have 10 minutes.
So let me just say that in bringing the ecology in, it's not just how do we attend to the ecology, but also seeing the ecology as a resource. So one of the things I do when people come here on the programs here on the edge of Bath, because we have woodlands, is I get them to walk, because that means we are in partnership, we are shoulder to shoulder as they supervise, to attend to what's right in front of them, but also what's on the horizon, and how can they use what's around them to help them do the work. So this notion of the ecology is not just a challenge, it's that which supports and resources and gives us the source from where we can work. So the ecology is doing the work as well as us. But then if we go on to the stage beyond engaging through the ecology and with the ecology, becoming eco-active. How do we bring it to every conversation? But also, we're going to be doing this on Climate Coaching Day, encouraging everyone to put something on their website about what are their commitments about the ecology and the climate crisis, because we find that also means we attract people who then want to include that in the work. Also, how do we start to, ensure, so I only take part in conferences now that are doing something actively to announce how this conference could be more ecological. So I'm insisting that's part of my agreement to take part in a conference. Also, Eve's already mentioned, if we go back here, the Climate Coaching Alliance, we're gradually, this started in December, all the major coaching bodies are involved. And we would encourage any of you who are part of ICF, the MCC, Coaching Psychology, the AC, any of those organizations to take part, because we're trying to get them all to commit to changing the basic competencies, ethical values, and what they're asking every coaching organization to include. I don't think it's okay any longer to have a coach training program that does not address being eco-informed and eco-engaged as part of the primary basic training. If we go on to the last one, what I've just been starting to talk about, I was very shocked at a recent global ICF conference that I wasn't at, but I talked to people there and I said, what workshops were there on ecological awareness? What was written about in terms of information on how you could attend this in the most eco-friendly way? And there was nothing. I think we can no longer allow that to happen. I think as a profession, we're behind some others like architecture and psychology who started to wake up. But as somebody said, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time to plant a tree is today. So it doesn't matter where we're starting from, there's a lot we can all do. And if we go on to the next one, Eve.
Yes, well, these are just some examples of how we put in our final chapter in the book some ways that we thought we could make a difference in increasing our beneficial impact. A mixed economy is, for example, charging differently for different sectors, for different geographies, according to people's earnings. People who are starting up their business, you might agree to charge them later. So there are just different ways that we can have a mixed economy for ourselves. The concept of tithing was something talked about by Charles Handy, who described 4 types of work. There's paid work, gift work, home work with family, and study work. And possibly we donate a percentage of our income. There are many, many projects which are socially conscious. Lily, who isn't on the call today, as you will know, was involved with coach activism, as were Peter and I, and I'm sure some of you on the call. Diversifying the industry, so providing our support for groups and geographies where we think it will be taken to new areas, areas that are underrepresented, where we might want to support new and emerging leaders. And then I think speaking up, awakening the profession is about speaking up. And Peter's already mentioned some examples of how we might do that. So asking for virtual when instead of face-to-face. And I'm sorry, my computer may have gone down. I'm not sure. Oh no, it hasn't. Do you know, my computer just went into a black hole and I thought, has it logged me out? Which it does sometimes. So I don't want to take too long on this, because what we really want to do is to give you an opportunity to have a final conversation by thinking about one way you can deepen and broaden your supervision work. And if some of you aren't yet supervising, then think about it as a supervisee. And one first step you might make, if you'd like to commit to becoming more eco-engaged and eco-active. Is there anything you'd add, Peter?
I would just take out the word "if you'd like to," and just say, if the world needs you to, and the answer to that is obvious. But so, we would really like to not go to a discussion, but we'll just do this for 7 minutes, and for each person to go around and say, look, this is one simple step that I could do that would mean I was doing more for the generations that came after. So really share, because that will support each other. If you share something specific that you could go away from being on this webinar and do as your next step, and they'll all be different.
So Damien, if you could just break us into groups again, and I'll just stop the share. So how you
I will do it again. The only thing is to be able to finish on time. We need to do it for 5 minutes. Okay, so
that's fine.
A couple of minutes.
And you're in small groups, so you should be able to find one way to broaden and deepen your work, and then one commitment. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome back. I know 1 or 2 people had to leave, but it'd be lovely to not only put the slides on the website, but I'd really encourage you before you go to type in what's your specific commitments, right? And I won't name you by name, but I will mention some of these on the Climate Coaching Day on March the 5th about some of the things the American Supervisor Network are doing. Because I think the more we could just share those, the more it's an inspiration for others. So please, if you get a chance, and Damien, if you can make sure that we keep a record of all the ones that go in, all the questions and the commitments, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, Peter, and I am not sure if everybody's aware of what's happening on March 5th. Maybe you want to make an announcement on that.
I think what I'd like to do is particularly as Jean-Christophe has asked very rightly, great conversations, how do we take it further by a large core fraction? So on March the 5th, it's been designated Climate Coaching Action Day. And something I've co-founded, which Peter is supporting, is the Climate Coaching Alliance. And I've just added the website, so you can all go and join. It's free to join and be a member, and there'll be lots of resources there over time. And our contribution to this day, and I was mad to have this idea, honestly, anyway, was to have a 24-hour conversation about coaching and climate change. So we start at midnight UTC, Universal Time, and go to midnight. We have 2 hosts for every time zone, and they hand over on the hour every hour. So that's what's happening. So really, everyone should be able to join an hour. If you join at 1300, you'll get a local host, but you can join at any time, and it will just be exciting as to where it's being hosted from. So if you're in Paris and you join at 9 o'clock at night, no, 8 o'clock, no, got to get this right. I think 10 o'clock your time, you'll get David Drake and David Matthew Pryor in Oregon and New York. If you join, early in the morning, you'll get someone in the Far East. So, you know, you can join 1300 local time and you'll get a local host. And if you all want to get Peter, then you have to join 1300 UK time. And I've just increased the capacity of the Zoom room so that we won't be overwhelmed. But you can join and get Peter for an hour. Actually, it's going to be more than an hour because he's doing a little bit more than that. So if you join between 1 and 3 o'clock UTC, then you'll get Peter and Zoe Clough.
Zoe Cohen.
It was Zoe Cohen. I keep doing that. I work with this lady called Zoe.
I mean, I can send an invitation to everybody who are in the mailing list. I can send information so they can join that. So if you can send it to me, I will share that with everyone. If by any chance we have people here for first time and you want to be added to the list, please write right now in the chat room your email, so we can include your email in the mailing list if you don't get invitations. So we can do that. We need to wrap up because we're on time. I don't know if Pete, anything you want to say before we finish today, because we're running late.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for joining, but also thank you for the difference, the bigger impact you all can make in the world.
And to wrap up, I want to thank both of you. I want to recommend everybody to get their book. It's an amazing book on systemic coaching, really applicable to the work that we do as supervisors. Both of them have done an amazing job in putting together this book and this resource. So thank you for your contribution to the profession. And before you go, two announcements. Tomorrow, 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, not a good time for Europe, not a good time for the East Coast, but a good time for Asia. We have the Asian network where everybody's invited and we talk about different supervisory topics. Tomorrow is going to be group supervision. So everybody who's interested, let me know if you don't have information. And on March 30, we have our next network meeting, and we have Pam McLeod coming to talk, and we're going to be discussing her book, Self as Coach, Self as Leader. This is a great resource. And she's also going to be coming to the conference we are organizing in Mexico. Peter and Pam are the two keynotes for the conference coming up in May 7 and 8 in Mexico City. So thanks everybody. That was a great event. Very glad that I was able to be here at the end. No electricity at the beginning, very stressed out, but everything worked out really well. So thanks everyone for being here today. And thank you, Eve and Peter, for being here and for all of your contribution to the coaching, supervision, and the work to make this place a better place for everyone. Thank you. Thanks everybody.
Thanks.
Very well.
Thank you,
Peter.
everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.